I'm not entirely sure what this moment feels like for you right now, but something drew my attention in your direction, and it would have felt incomplete to ignore it. So I need to ask you something, not about the surface of your life or the parts that look neat and understandable from the outside, but about what has been shifting underneath it all. What's been moving quietly in the unseen space within you? Is there a burden you've been carrying? Or has something recently begun to lift? Do your days feel like they're opening into possibility, or are they pressing down on you in ways you haven't quite articulated yet? You don't owe me an explanation. You don't owe anyone that. But I need you to know that right here, in this very moment, you appeared in my awareness with intention. And if the new year arrived and no one paused long enough to acknowledge the silent battles you fought, or the strength it took just to keep showing up, then let this be that pause. There's something I want you to hear, something that maybe no one has said to you yet. I've witnessed your journey, not in the obvious ways, not just through the milestones or the visible victories, but through the subtle internal recalibrations, the small shifts no one else notices. You are further along than you think. And I'm not proud of you because of what you've achieved or because you can list accomplishments. I'm proud of you because you stayed. Because on the days where it would have been easier to numb yourself, to disappear, to disconnect into the haze, you chose to remain present. That decision, quiet, steady, unglamorous, carries far more power than you realize. You matter more than you've allowed yourself to believe. There is only one frequency in existence that matches yours, and that is not insignificant. That is not a small detail. As this year continues to unfold, I genuinely feel it will meet you differently. Not without resistance or friction. Those are the things that shape us, but with more grace, more coherence, more alignment with who you're becoming. And here's what I need you to understand. You are not behind. You have not missed your chance. There is no expiration date on what belongs to you. The universe does not operate on timelines that shut you out. There's an old truth I keep hearing echo back. There's a fracture in everything. That fracture isn't the problem, it's the doorway. It's the opening where the light enters. Take care of yourself. And as this new year opens, may it reflect back the care you've been quietly giving yourself all along. But here's what. I actually want to talk about how frequency reorganizes your reality, because what I just shared wasn't merely a kind sentiment. It was a transmission. And whether you felt it or not, something in your field just shifted. That's how this works. That's what most people overlook about language, about attention, about care that's directed towards you with precision. It doesn't land as words alone. It lands as frequency. And frequency reorganizes matter. Frequency reorganizes your internal reality, which means the moment you allow yourself to truly receive acknowledgement, to be seen, not for what you've achieved, but simply for being here, still choosing, still breathing through it, all you've already begun to reconfigure the structure of what becomes possible for you. Let me take you further, because this is the point where quantum mechanics stops being abstract theory and becomes the most practical tool you have for navigating existence. You were taught that reality is fixed, that circumstances dictate your experience, that the past determines the future. And from the outside, it does appear that whereas if you're moving through a preset world, reacting to it, trying to manage whatever shows up, but that's not how the quantum field operates. That's not how consciousness interacts with the fabric of reality. At the quantum level, nothing is solid until it is observed. Nothing is finalized until awareness collapses the wave of potential into a specific experience. And right now, You are the observer, not passively, not by accident. You are the conscious presence, determining which version of reality materializes around you. The quality of your attention, the frequency you're broadcasting, the coherence or incoherence of your inner state, all of that is actively selecting from an infinite field of possibilities which timeline you step into next. Most people move through life without awareness of this. They assume their thoughts are private, that their emotions are just internal weather patterns that don't influence the external world. But every thought, every emotion, every belief about who you are and what's possible is information being transmitted into the field, and the field responds. Not later, not after you've earned it or become worthy. In real time, the field is always responding to the signal you emit, always reflecting back the frequency you're holding, always mirroring your inner state through external circumstances. So when I told you earlier that you matter, that you're doing better than you think, that this year will meet you with more grace, I wasn't offering comforting fluff. I was interrupting the loop. I was introducing a new frequency into your system, one that says, you are not broken, you are not behind, you are not the problem. And when that lands, not just in your mind, but in your body, in your nervous system, in the part of you that has been holding tension so long it feels normal, something fundamental shifts. The signal changes. And when the signal changes, the external reflection has no choice but to reorganize in response. This is where most people get lost. They hear this and assume it means just think positive thoughts, just affirm your way to a better life. They try that, nothing changes, and they decide this is all spiritual bypassing dressed in quantum terminology. But that's not what's happening. They're trying to alter the signal from the mind alone. And the mind is not where the signal originates. The signal originates in the body, in the nervous system, in the emotional field, in the subconscious patterns that were wired in before you had language to question them. You can repeat affirmations endlessly, but if your body is still broadcasting the belief that you are unsafe, not enough, or that good things simply do not happen for people like you, then that is the signal the field receives. The mind's words are surface. The body's frequency is the transmission. What broadcasts is not the mind, it's the body. And this is the reason so many people feel stuck. They try to overpower their internal state through mental effort, and it simply doesn't work like that. You cannot think your way out of a frequency you are actively embodying. The frequency itself has to shift. The internal environment has to change. The nervous system has to be recalibrated so that safety, worthiness, and possibility aren't distant concepts you're trying to reach for, but the baseline you're resting in. So how does that happen? How do you rewire the signal when the patterns are so deeply integrated that you don't even recognize them anymore? You begin by noticing, by bringing awareness to the loop you've been running, not to judge it, not to fix it, simply to see it. Because the moment you see it, you're not trapped inside of it anymore. You become the observer again, and the observer always has the capacity to choose something different. Here is what that looks like in real time. Imagine you notice that whenever something good starts to emerge in your life, you instinctively brace yourself. Some part of you whispers, "Don't get too hopeful. This won't last. You're only setting yourself up to be disappointed again." That isn't pessimism. That isn't realism. That's your nervous system running a protective protocol, trying to shield you from the pain of loss by preventing you from fully opening to what's already here. And it makes complete sense. If you've been hurt, if things have been taken from you, If you've learned through experience that joy is temporary and pain is inevitable, of course, some part of you would attempt to guard against that. But here's the cost. In trying so hard to protect you from future pain, that same pattern also blocks you from receiving present joy. It collapses every moment of possibility into the same familiar outcome, and the field, always responsive, always mirroring the frequency, keeps generating experiences that validate the pattern. So you begin to notice, you see the reflex, and instead of letting the program run automatically, you pause, you breathe, you drop your awareness into your body and ask, what would it feel like to let this be good? What would it feel like to stay open, to stay here, to allow this moment of joy to exist without preparing for it to vanish? You may not have an answer. You may only feel tension, resistance, old wiring pulling you back toward the familiar. But you stay with it. You breathe into it. You continue asking. You let the question itself begin to soften the pattern's grip, and then, almost imperceptibly, something begins to shift. Maybe it's subtle. Maybe it feels like a slight loosening in your chest, or an easing in your shoulders, or a tiny sense that perhaps, just perhaps, it might be safe to let goodness land. That's the frequency shifting. That's the signal being recalibrated, and the field receives that. The field always receives that, because the field does not care about your narrative. It doesn't track your history. It doesn't weigh how many times you've been hurt or how many times you've tried. The field only responds to the frequency you're broadcasting in this moment. And when the frequency changes, even slightly, the reflection begins to change alongside it. This is where the real practice begins, because it isn't enough to do this once. It isn't enough to have a moment of insight or a moment of softening and then return to the default program. The default program has momentum. It has durability. It has been operating for a long time. And unless you consciously interrupt it again and again, it will pull you back into itself. So the practice becomes repetition. The practice becomes noticing the pattern, pausing, breathing, asking the question, allowing the frequency to shift, and then doing it again when it shows up next time, and again, until the new frequency becomes more familiar than the old one, until the nervous system begins to recognize safety, worthiness, and possibility as home. And if what we're exploring here is resonating with you, if you can feel that small internal shift happening even as you listen, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this frequency reach more people who are ready for it. Now, let's continue. Here's what unfolds when you engage this consistently. Here's what emerges when you stop trying to mentally overpower the pattern and instead shift the frequency at the somatic level, at the nervous system level, at the level where the signal originates. Your external reality begins to reorganize. Not because you manifested through force of will, not because you recited enough affirmations or built the perfect vision board, but because you changed the signal you were broadcasting and the field responded. It always responds. That's the law. That's the nature of the quantum field. It matches your frequency. It mirrors your internal state. It brings forth circumstances and opportunities that correspond to the signal. You're embodying so if your internal state is shaped by lack, by not enoughness, by bracing for disappointment. The field will continue to reflect that frequency back to you, not as punishment, not because you failed, but because that's the signal you're emitting, and the field is neutral. It doesn't judge, it doesn't withhold, it only reflects. But when the signal shifts, when you begin to embody safety, worthiness, and possibility not as ideals you're chasing, but as a state you're resting in. The field has no choice but to reorganize accordingly. That's when synchronicities begin. That's when opportunities form out of nowhere. That's when circumstances, people, and resources align in ways that feel almost miraculous. Except it isn't a miracle. It's simply the field responding to the frequency you finally allowed yourself to inhabit. Now, I need you to pause for a moment, because there's something I want you to do. Not later. Not when you get around to it. Right now, I want you to take a moment and write this exact phrase in the comments. I am the frequency that shifts reality. Don't just read it and continue. Actually type it. Let it anchor into the field through action. Let your fingers actually move across the keyboard. Let the words take form through action. Because this isn't just a comment, it's a declaration. It's you signaling to the field, to your own nervous system, to the part of you that has been quietly waiting for permission, that you're ready to step into this understanding, that you're ready to recognize yourself not as a passive recipient of reality, but as the active force shaping it. So go ahead, pause the video if you need to, and leave that comment. I am the frequency that shifts reality. Let it land. Let it register. Let it begin to reorganize the field around you. Good. Now, let's go deeper. Because there's another layer here that most people never explore. And it's this. The reason you've been stuck in certain loops, the reason the same patterns keep repeating, is not because you're broken or because you're doing life incorrectly. It's because at some point, usually early on, usually before you had the capacity to question it, you learned that a particular pattern was the safest way to move through your environment. Maybe you learned that staying small, quiet, invisible was the way to avoid conflict. Maybe you learned that working hard, achieving, proving your worth was the way to earn love or approval. Maybe you learned that shutting down emotionally and hiding your true self was the best way to protect yourself from being hurt. And here's the thing, those patterns worked. They kept you safe. They helped you adapt. They allowed you to survive circumstances you had no choice but to navigate. And some part of you is still running them because it believes they're essential. It believes that if you stop being small, or stop performing, or stop protecting, you'll be exposed again. You'll be in danger again. So even though you consciously want transformation, even though you know these patterns are constraining you now, some deeper layer of your being is clinging to them because it thinks they are keeping you alive. This is why willpower fails. This is why you can't just decide to be different and expect it to hold. Because the part running the pattern isn't functioning from conscious choice. It's functioning from survival code. And survival code cannot be overwritten with logic or intention or positive thinking. You have to meet it at its own depth. You have to speak to the part of you that's afraid. The part of you that's been guarding you for years. And you have to show it that it's safe now. That the threat has passed. That you have new awareness, new resources, new capacity to handle life without needing to stay small, shut down, or perform for belonging. And when you do that, when you meet the pattern with compassion instead of shame, when you acknowledge the protector instead of fighting it, something profound begins to loosen. The grip relaxes. Space opens. Suddenly you have room to choose differently, not because you forced a new behavior, not because you muscled your way into change, but because you brought consciousness to what was unconscious. You brought light to what was previously hidden, and in the presence of light, the old pattern can finally release. This is the actual work. This is what it means to shift your frequency. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's not about bypassing discomfort or suppressing pain. It's about bringing awareness to the programs running beneath the surface, meeting them with compassion, and consciously choosing a new response. When you do that, when you shift from unconscious reaction to intentional choice, the signal changes, the frequency changes, and the field, always mirroring you, always reflecting, begins to deliver a different reality. So here's what I need you to understand. That message I opened with, the acknowledgement that you matter, that you're further along than you think, that this year will meet you differently, that wasn't just kindness. It was a frequency intervention. It was directed toward the part of you that has been holding tension, waiting quietly for permission, wondering if it's safe to finally let good things land. And if you allowed it in, if you let it soften something in your chest, in your nervous system, in your emotional field, then you've already begun shifting the signal. You've already started the recalibration, and the field is already responding. And if this is landing for you, if something in this conversation is touching a place inside you that has been waiting to be seen, then I want to invite you to subscribe. Not just to this channel, but to this frequency, to this understanding, to this practice of bringing consciousness to the unconscious and choosing differently. Because the more you engage with this, the more you immerse yourself in it, the more it becomes the baseline frequency you broadcast without effort. And that's when things change. That's when you stop trying to force life and start allowing life to move through you. That's when alignment replaces effort. That's when you step into the flow of what has been trying to reach you all along. Now, as we begin to move toward the close of this transmission, I want to give you something practical, something you can actually use. A practice to return to whenever you feel yourself slipping back into the old pattern, the old frequency, the old signal. It's simple, but don't confuse simplicity with weakness. The most potent tools are often the simplest. Here it is. When you notice the pattern, when you feel the old frequency tightening its grip, pause, breathe, place one hand over your heart and the other over your lower belly, and ask, what would love do right now? Not what would fear do. Not what would the old pattern do. Not what would the survival program do. What would love do? And then wait. Don't rush. Don't let the mind answer first. Let the answer rise from the body, from the heart, from the deeper intelligence within you that knows. And whatever emerges, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it surprises you, trust it. Because love is not always soft. Sometimes love is a boundary. Sometimes love is honesty. Sometimes love is choosing to walk away from what no longer supports your expansion. But whatever form it takes, love always moves you toward coherence, toward alignment, toward resonance with the person you're becoming. And that is the frequency that shifts reality. That is the signal the field responds to. That is what changes everything now. Everything we're touching on today, this understanding of how frequency shapes reality, how the field reflects the signal you're broadcasting, this is foundational work. But I want you to know that what we're covering here is only the outermost layer of a much deeper system. If you're feeling called to go beyond concepts and actually embody the full frequency, architecture to move through all 9 ascending currents, from survival static to becoming the field itself, I've created a comprehensive guide that walks you step by step through that journey. It's called Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery, and it's linked in the pinned comment below. So, as this new year unfolds, as you navigate whatever arrives next, remember this: you are not a passive observer. You are the activating force. You are the signal that shapes the field. And every time you pause, every time you breathe, every time you choose love instead of fear, conscious presence instead of unconscious reaction, you are recalibrating the transmission. You are altering what becomes possible. You are stepping into a version of reality that has always existed, but could not take form until you were capable of holding its frequency. But let's peel this back even further, because there's a layer here that is often ignored, and ironically, it's the most essential part. When we talk about shifting frequency or transforming your signal, it's easy to imagine it as a one-time action, like flipping a switch and suddenly everything changes. But transformation doesn't unfold that way. That's not how the nervous system rewires. That's not how new patterns anchor themselves into the soil of your being. True change emerges in layers. It grows through repetition, through consistency, through showing up for the practice, especially on the days you don't want to. Consider it like this: your present reality, the one you're living in right now, isn't the outcome of a single decision yesterday or a single choice last month. It's the product of thousands of micro-decisions, thousands of small selections, thousands of moments where you either reinforced the familiar pattern or opened space for something different. Every time you stayed quiet when you wanted to speak, every time you dimmed your brightness so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable, every time you convinced yourself that what you longed for wasn't possible or wasn't meant for someone like you were broadcasting a signal, and the field reacted. It always reacts. It gave you evidence that staying small was necessary, more validation that dimming your light was safer, more confirmation that what you wanted existed out of reach. But here's the beautiful twist. Here's the thing that changes the entire landscape. The same small choices that built the old patterns can build new ones. The same repetition that reinforced the old signal can anchor a new signal. And perfection is not required. You don't have to overhaul your entire frequency in a dramatic leap. You only have to choose differently in this moment, and then again in the next, and then again after that, because each time you choose differently, you generate new evidence for your nervous system that being different is safe. You show the subconscious mind that the old pattern isn't the only pathway. You carve new neural roots, new somatic responses, new frequencies that eventually become more familiar than the ones you've lived in for years. Let me make this tangible. Imagine you've spent most of your life vibrating at a frequency of scarcity, not because you consciously selected it, but because somewhere in your history you absorbed the belief that there's never enough, not enough money, not enough love, not enough time, not enough of anything. That scarcity frequency has been running like a background program, influencing every choice, every opportunity, every relationship. It becomes the lens through which you view reality. And because it's the signal you're transmitting, the field mirrors it back. You notice all the places where there isn't enough. You overlook opportunities because you're too focused on holding on to what little you have. You cling tightly to relationships, fearing that if you release them, no one else will appear. Now shifting from scarcity to abundance, from lack to sufficiency, isn't something that unfolds overnight. You can't chant an affirmation once and expect your nervous system to immediately recalibrate, because scarcity has roots. It has history. It has functioned as a survival mechanism for so long that abandoning it feels risky. So the shift happens slowly. It happens through small acts of trust. It happens when you notice the scarcity thought arise, and instead of letting it run unchecked, you pause and ask, is that actually true? Is there really not enough? Or is that just the old program speaking? Maybe the first time you ask, the answer still feels like yes. It feels true that there isn't enough. But the point is not the answer. The point is the pause. The interruption, then the next day or the next week, you ask again. And this time, a tiny opening appears. A small crack in the certainty of the scarcity narrative. You notice something you overlooked, something you already have, something you've been bypassing. Maybe it's clean water. Maybe it's a bed. Maybe it's a person who cares. It isn't everything you want, but it is something. And in that single moment of noticing, you've shifted the frequency. You sent a different signal to the field, and you continue. You keep interrupting the automatic scarcity response. Not to bypass reality, not to pretend everything is flawless, but to retrain your nervous system to recognize what is actually here, what is actually available, what is actually true beyond the old filter. Gradually, your baseline shifts. The frequency of abundance becomes more natural than the frequency of lack. And when that happens, when the new signal becomes your default, the external realm begins to reorganize in ways that feel almost magical. Opportunities surface. Resources arrive. People show up with support you didn't realize you needed. Not because you forced it, not because you willed it through pure manifestation effort, but because you altered the transmission, and the field responded. This is the work. This is what it means to shift frequency. It isn't glamorous. It isn't always thrilling. Often it's subtle, quiet, invisible to everyone but you. But it is potent. It is the most potent work available to you, because when you shift your frequency, when you alter the signal you're broadcasting, you're not only changing your personal reality, you're altering the informational field that surrounds you. You're influencing the quantum options that can fold into form. You become a different attractor within the field, drawing to you experiences, humans, opportunities, and circumstances that resonate with the new signal you embody. And one more essential truth: this path is not linear. You don't shift once and graduate. It's far more like a spiral. You'll revisit old patterns over and over, but each return is at a new level. A different level of awareness. You're carrying more consciousness. You're responding with more choice. And that is not failure. That is not proof that you're stuck or not progressing. That is exactly what growth looks like. You spiral through familiar territory, but you are never in the same place twice. Each cycle through the pattern offers another chance to choose differently, to respond from deeper awareness, to embody the frequency you're claiming with more precision and more presence. So let me ask you something as you're hearing this. What old pattern is becoming visible for you right now? What frequency have you been operating from that you're finally ready to shift? Drop a comment and share it. Sometimes the simple act of naming the pattern is the first step toward dissolving it. So when the old pattern resurfaces, and it will, don't collapse into judgment. Don't assume you've failed or that you're starting over. Just witness it. Acknowledge it. Thank it for appearing, because it's giving you another doorway into the practice. And then you make the choice. Ask the question. Shift the frequency. Even if the shift is tiny, even if it lasts for only a breath, because those small increments compound. Those micro adjustments accumulate. Over time, they form an entirely different reality. Now, I want to add another layer to this conversation. A layer about how your frequency influences not just your personal reality, but the collective field. Because you don't exist as an isolated node. You are part of a larger web of consciousness, a network of interconnected fields. And when you shift your frequency, when you change your signal, you aren't just altering your own experience, you're affecting everyone within your field. You send ripples through the collective that other people can feel, even if they never consciously register it. Consider the last time you were near someone who was genuinely at ease. Someone who embodied a frequency of calm, grounded presence. You didn't need to ask them how they felt. You felt it. Their coherence influenced your coherence. Their internal state modulated your internal state. And that's not symbolic or mystical poetry. That's measurable. Studies on heart coherence show that the electromagnetic field generated by a human heart extends multiple feet beyond the body. And when someone is in a coherent state, when their mental and emotional systems are synchronized, that field has a detectable effect on the nervous systems of others nearby. It helps regulate them. It helps bring them into coherence as well. This is the potency of frequency. This is why your inner work matters on a scale that extends far beyond self-improvement. When you shift from chaos to coherence, from fear to love, from scarcity to sufficiency, you are not just altering your personal trajectory. You are altering the collective field. You become a node of coherence, a stabilizing point that others can attune to. And the more individuals who make this shift, the more humans who take responsibility for their frequency, their signal, their presence, the more the collective field real. This is how societal shifts occur, not through force, not through trying to fix everyone else or repair the world through external means alone, but through individuals transforming the vibrational architecture from within. Because when enough people shift, when enough nervous systems embody coherence, the collective field is compelled to reflect it. New potentials emerge. Solutions become visible. Systems that seemed immovable begin to bend. And all of it begins with one person, with you. With me choosing to interrupt the automatic pattern and select a different frequency. Now take a moment and think about someone in your life who might need to hear this right now. Someone navigating their own patterns, their own frequency, their own relationship with reality. Share this with them, not just because it could support them, but because the act of transmitting this understanding strengthens it within your own field. When you share frequency work, when you become a transmitter of awareness, you deepen your coherence. You reinforce the signal you're choosing to broadcast, and you generate ripples in the collective field that benefit everyone. So every time you pause, every time you breathe, every time you choose presence instead of reactivity, love instead of fear, coherence instead of chaos, you're not only helping yourself, you're contributing to the collective evolution of consciousness. You're participating in the planetary shift that is underway, and that matters. It matters more profoundly than you realize. Let me speak to timing for a moment, because there's a lot of confusion around when change actually occurs, when the shift clicks into form, when the new reality appears. Many people imagine a single event, a clear before and after, where everything reorganizes instantly. And yes, sometimes that does happen. There are breakthrough moments, quantum leaps, abrupt shifts that are impossible to ignore, but more commonly, transformation happens so gradually that you don't notice it until you look back and realize how far you've traveled. It's like observing a plant grow. If you sit and stare, nothing seems to change. But return a week or a month later and the growth is undeniable. That's how frequency shifts work. The change is continuous, but often imperceptible in any single moment. Only when you zoom out, when you view the broader pattern, can you see the arc of transformation. And this is where patience enters the practice. Not passive resignation, not disengagement, but active patience. The kind of patience that trusts the process, that knows the field is reorganizing even when the evidence hasn't surfaced yet, that keeps showing up to the work despite the absence of immediate results. Because this is the reality, the field is always responding. There is never a moment when your frequency isn't being met, when your signal isn't being mirrored back. But there's often a gap between the shift of frequency and its manifestation in form. Think of planting a seed. The moment you place it into the soil, a process begins, but you don't see the sprout the next day. You don't witness the roots anchoring themselves beneath the earth, or the stem pushing upward through darkness, or the internal reconfiguration that must occur before anything breaks through the surface. Yet the growth is happening. The transformation is underway. And if you were to dig up that seed every single day to check whether it's growing, you would disrupt the process entirely. You'd interfere with what's trying to emerge. You'd damage the very life that's attempting to break through. The same principle applies to frequency shifts. When you adjust your internal signal, when you alter the state you're broadcasting to the field, you've planted a seed in the quantum, and that seed is germinating. The field is responding. Reality is reorganizing itself around the new frequency you're holding. But if you're constantly checking for results, constantly seeking proof, constantly questioning whether it's working, you're actually creating interference. One part of you is holding the new frequency, but another part is still broadcasting the old signal. The signal of doubt, of scarcity, of not yet. And the field doesn't respond to fragments. It responds to the composite. It mirrors the totality of your signal, not just the part you wish you were transmitting. This is why trust becomes essential. And trust is not blind optimism. Trust is not pretending everything is fine when you're struggling. Trust is the willingness to sustain the new frequency even before the external evidence arrives. Trust is the capacity to know that the field is already in motion, that the process is underway, that the shift is happening even before it manifests in form. And that trust, that unwavering commitment to the new signal, is what allows reality to reorganize without being disrupted. That is what gives the seed space to grow until it's ready to break the surface on its own timeline. So if you've been doing this work, if you've been shifting your frequency and you're wondering why nothing seems different yet, consider this possibility. Maybe everything is changing, and you just can't see it from where you're standing. Maybe the roots are forming. Maybe the field is recalibrating. Maybe the new architecture is assembling beneath the surface of your awareness, and it simply needs more time, more stability, more consistent broadcasting before it becomes visible. And while you're trusting, while you're waiting, keep showing up to the practice. Keep interrupting the automatic pattern. Keep choosing the new frequency. Keep asking yourself, what would love do in this moment? Because every time you do, you're reinforcing the signal. You're strengthening the new pathways. You're training your nervous system to understand that this frequency is safe, sustainable, and available. You're building the capacity to hold it long enough for it, to become your baseline rather than a temporary spike. There's one more dimension I want to explore before we close, and it involves the connection between frequency and purpose. Because I have found, through experience, through observation, and through working with thousands of people, that when your frequency shifts, when you enter coherence and alignment, you naturally begin to live in a way that is more congruent with your deeper purpose. Not because you figured your purpose out mentally, not because you analyzed yourself into clarity, and not because someone assigned you a role, but because purpose emerges spontaneously from coherent frequency, when you're operating from fear, from scarcity, from survival conditioning. You're too preoccupied with staying safe to hear the deeper calling. You're too occupied with protecting yourself, with proving yourself, with managing perception, with avoiding rejection, to notice what's trying to move through you. But when you shift into trust, into sufficiency, into love, something opens. The noise quiets, and in that quiet, you begin to hear the whisper of what wants to be expressed through you. The thing you came here to contribute, the thing you're uniquely structured to transmit. Purpose isn't something you hunt for. Purpose reveals itself when you're in the correct frequency to perceive it. And the correct frequency is not some elevated spiritual peak state. It's simply the frequency of authenticity, being fully present, fully alive, fully yourself without the armor, without the masks, without the survival strategies that have been shrinking you. When you let those fall away, when you allow yourself to be who you actually are beneath the conditioning, purpose becomes obvious. It's the thing you gravitate toward naturally. It's the thing that lights your system up. It's what you would do even without applause, without an audience, without compensation. And when you begin to live from that frequency, when your actions align with your authentic signal, the field reorganizes around you. Opportunities arise that are precisely aligned with what you're here to express. People appear who need exactly what you offer. Resources flow in ways that support the embodiment of that purpose. Not because you're manifesting from ego, not because you're forcing outcomes, but because you're in alignment. You're broadcasting the truth of who you are, and the field mirrors that truth. You're not late. You're not behind. You haven't missed anything. The fractures you've been ashamed of, the cracks you've been carrying, those are the openings where the light enters. Those are the exact places that make you capable of holding this frequency, of transmitting it, of becoming the one who doesn't just shift their own life, but influences the collective field. Because that's what happens when you do this work. You don't just transform your personal experience. You become a frequency source that others can attune to. You become evidence. You become living proof of what's possible when someone stops running the old program and finally chooses to embody something new. So take care of yourself, not just in the superficial ways you were taught, but in the deeper ways, the ways that honor the frequency you came here to hold. And before you go, I want to ask you for one more thing. Leave one word in the comments. One word that captures the energy you're choosing from this point forward. Not the energy of your past, not the pattern you've been trapped in, the energy you're claiming now. Let that word be your declaration. Let it be your broadcast. Let it be the beginning of the shift that's already underway. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do that, not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent. To remain in this frequency, to remind yourself that reality is not fixed, that you are not powerless, that every moment offers another chance to adjust the signal and watch the field respond. The more of us who hold this understanding, who embody this frequency, who choose consciousness over unconsciousness, the more the collective field shifts to reflect that truth. This isn't just personal transformation. This is collective evolution, and you are part of it. You always have been. Take care. And may the year ahead meet you with the same grace you've been offering yourself internally.